Sarah Henstra is a professor of English at Ryerson University and author of the young adult novel Mad Miss Mimic. It reminds me of those books that Margaret Atwood did, Purple...
Oh, the children's books.
Children's books, yeah.
Penelope and...
Yes,
yeah, that's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But this isn't children, this is young adults.
This is young adult.
And The Red Word is her first work of adult fiction, and has just won the Governor General's Award for fiction. Congratulations.
Thanks a lot, Nigel.
I assume that the title is riffing off The Scarlet Letter?
That's an interesting intertext, actually. I mean, it's a fairly common phrase. It's an evocative phrase, the red word, and it can refer to all kinds of different fraught symbols or historical, words that lead into battle, or words that hurl an accusation between one group and another. Yeah, it was selected for the title out of the book because there is a reference in the novel to a red word. There are a couple of references to different words being a red word.
Rape being one of them?
And rape is one of the words, yeah. At one point, the protagonist, Karen, is reluctant to call one of the things that's happened in the novel rape. She doesn't want to phrase it that way because she says that rape is a red word. It's a greedy word that sort of casts dispersions in all directions, including on the person who's making the accusation, draws a lot of public scrutiny and attention that, maybe an accuser, even if they have been wronged in some way, doesn't want that kind of attention suddenly put on herself and all of her actions.
Yeah, speaking of that, in the Scarlet Letter, the protagonist is accused of adultery, and she has to do this walk of shame.
Yeah, it is a fascinating intertext, actually, for what I'm doing in this novel, and it's incredible that it's always incredible to me how things come up in conversation about the novel I've written, and they weren't a conscious part of what I was writing, but they make a lot of sense. And of course, I've read the Scarlet Letter, I studied the Scarlet Letter, I've taught the Scarlet Letter, and over the years ago, and it makes perfect sense that it's bubbling in there under the surface, while I'm writing this. Yeah, I think accusation and shame are both very important motifs in my novel. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I guess the thing that stuck out for me, too, is that there's this double standard. It's okay for the guy to screw around, but heaven forbid that a woman do something like that.
Yeah, it's a very different, and it's the same sexual behavior in a lot of cases, same sort of party mandate, but the young women who get involved in it, the repercussions are very different for them, socially speaking, than they are for the young men. The double standard is sort of a topic that runs throughout the novel, and just the differences in how masculinity is celebrated for being aggressive and, sexually promiscuous and almost predatory in a way. And femininity is meant to be passive and chaste, and sort of femininity is meant to be the repository for all moral behavior, essentially, right? The young women are supposed to keep the young men in line somehow, and when they don't, when they make other choices to either go along with it or have their own sexual adventures, they're called out pretty quickly and publicly shamed pretty quickly.
You are communicating with Greek mythology in the book. I've recently, I believe it's the Iliad that you play or pay most attention to. I've just recently reread the Odyssey, and of course Penelope is getting hit on for 10 years after the war.
Yes, and holding out.
And that's
remaining faithful and waiting.
Exactly, and that's seen as obviously as something to be cherished and admired.
Yeah, her virtue consists of, sort of putting up walls and walling herself in with her maids, right, to resist the encroaching of these sort of ravenous suitors who are after her, but they're also after the kingdom, of course.
Right,
she sort of stands as the repository for all the wealth and all the inheritance there, and she has to hold out until Odysseus returns.
Yeah, whereas of course Odysseus is screwing his brains out on different
That's
islands.
Right. Typical adventurer, right? Yeah, and getting caught in the snares of various female goddesses and sirens.
It's not his fault.
No, he has to sort of extricate himself from their clutches over the span of 10 years or however long it takes him, right? On the island with Circe and the other goddesses who pleasure goddesses essentially, but whom eventually he also has to escape their clutches and leave. Yeah.
So very much the double standard.
The double standard, and also Penelope is being accused the whole time too, all that time by her own son, who sees her as unfaithful and fickle, and is trying to voice the concerns of his absent father, and remind her of her duties, her filial duties to him, and that sort of thing. So it's not like she's not under fire the whole time as well for her behavior.
Right. I didn't get that so much as he's just yearning for his father to come back so that his father can slay the suitors.
Yeah, and he's the rightful inheritor too of the property, right? So he's waiting for justice.
The job of the cultural critic is to examine the world and its stories, picking apart what is problematic and shining a light on unconscious and unexamined biases and attitudes. That's Becky Robinson in Quill and Choir.
Well done, Becky.
Which I thought it was kind of funny that she's reviewing your book. She's not exactly unbiased.
I'm not sure what her affiliation is with ECW, actually. That's interesting. But that's, that happens a lot in the publishing industry.
It sure does. Are you, as a novelist, playing the role of a cultural critic here?
Not consciously, not directly, but I do think, I believe that novelists are like other artists in that they're really drawn toward things that aren't being talked about explicitly in society. The sort of tensions that run underneath the conversations, and at least for me as a writer, I steer toward that because that's where my curiosity takes me, to the places where it's like, why does nobody know how to talk about this? Or why is no one refusing to talk about certain things? And you hear these sort of public debates go round and round in the media, and there's an undercurrent of tension there. And I think that as a writer, I'm drawn to that tension. I want to delve deeper into what people are having trouble saying or feel they can't say or don't know how to talk about. And I work with language, so the things the frontiers of what we know how to talk about, those are the places that interest me most as a novelist. So I think in doing that, in pursuing the unspoken or the uncomfortable or the not yet maybe even conscious in our social discourse, I think writers in general end up examining the unspoken assumptions, and they end up playing that role, that Becky describes of becoming kind of cultural critics, calling out certain positions that people take, But I don't think it's an intentional thing, because then we wouldn't be writing fiction. We would be writing op-ed pieces, and taking it on much more directly.
Well, in fact, the novel has taken you 5 to 7 years to write.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
So you were thinking hard about this sort of thing many years before Me Too suddenly hit the screen. And Me Too, it's not unconscious. It's very much in the forefront now.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. People, when they're discussing this thing, it's just pure anger that we're getting now. We're not getting much dialogue.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I think that the Me Too movement has allowed a kind of dialogue that wasn't there before, and I think the anger was in the back rooms before, and I was in a lot of those back rooms with other women, with fellow professors and fellow artists and fellow former graduate students and people who had a lot of these experiences that the Me Too movement is bringing out into public discourse, into the media. And I think the kinds of mutual distrust between men and women, and accusations against men in position of power that got swept under the carpet and kept quiet in corporations or various organizations. They were there. It's not like these things weren't happening all along. It's just that nobody was talking about it in the media. Nobody was talking about it in public. So what feels like this outpouring of anger and hostility, in fact, is a kind of just a light being shone on this kind of long-standing power imbalance that's been there for a long time, and the idea of public outrage is interesting because it makes it sound like it's all being fomented in the moment, but in fact I think that the distrust and resentment and stories have always been there. They've always been simmering. There's just been no place to air them publicly, and so it's not like there's more anger. It's just like it's actually being put into words, which I think is a very productive thing. You know?
For sure, yeah. And I think you had your antennae up 5 or 7 years ago, and now the novel's been published. It's being rewarded, and I just wonder what you think was in the heads of the judges. Is this a literary masterpiece, or is it a masterpiece of social commentary, or both?
Well, of course, as the writer, I'm going to be, of course, it's a masterpiece on all levels. Of course it is. Right. But honestly, my best estimation of it from the judge's perspective, based on the citation of, that they gave the book and based on the feedback I've had, is actually that this book has been called timely since the moment it was published, and that's a lucky thing, that the themes in the novel, or the social issues in the novel, are something that resonate with a public discussion. But also this book has been received with some various levels of discomfort by readers who don't find it a straightforward social, the championing of the metoo movement. They're not finding, if they're looking for that in the novel, they're not really finding that. And in fact, I've had responses from readers who say, I tried to read it, but it was all that Greek stuff. It's not really my thing. It's really clear you're a professor. You're kind of writing at a level that I'm not. That type of response, and also people who are quite deeply discomforted by the fact that the novel does not have a clear sort of moral trajectory where you can identify immediately who is in the right, and those people find justice by the end of the novel. That's not my project in this novel. So the level of attention to language and to the sort of intertextual element of the Greek myth, that long heritage of Western mythology that I allowed, to really max out in the novel, and a lot of that thematically murky material, those were things that I was engaged deeply with on a literary level, So in that sense, I think I can go ahead as the author and claim that it's a literary achievement as well as a thematic or social, timely project.
Yeah, it's very Greek in the sense that the ending isn't sort of filled with hope.
No, and that's Greek mythology isn't filled with hope because the gods pack up and go back up to Olympus and leave the human bodies littered all over the mountainsides, and I think I felt it would be doing a huge injustice to the issues and to try to tidy things up or to make it a clear sort of positive resolution, because I don't think it would be honest. I don't think we're there.
Well, it's Socratic too. It's kind of a dialogue, isn't it?
Yeah, I play with that quite a bit actually, and I have to say I had as a writer I had so much fun with it, playing with the Greek. There's these pages, a few pages scattered throughout the book where the group of female friends who live in the sort of feminist, woman-centered, eco-friendly, vegan household are sitting around chatting, and it says that the women of the house, hold forth amongst themselves on the topic of X, and then there's like a dialogue written out with their dialogue tags, kind of like a script from a play, and that's just sheer fun with the idea of a Greek chorus, right? And how it kind of, the experience of being in graduate school or in undergrad, and just the kind of endless conversations over glasses of wine that go round and round around ideas of, what is cinema? What is the role of cinema in society? Or just random, any topic at all can be debated at that age, because young people, coming to university for the first time, they're realizing that all these ideas are up for grabs in a way that they didn't realize maybe as teenagers, that everything they took as a given, that their parents taught them as givens growing up, come under scrutiny. If you're in a certain type of undergraduate setting where you're taking some philosophy classes or some cultural studies classes, and you realize that all the unspoken, hegemonic assumptions in society can be debated, and you can imagine different ways of thinking and different ways of understanding the world, and there's that incredible sort of excitement in that, and I had a really good time capturing that. I guess it's my own memories of that period in my life too. I'm an academic. I spent a long time in university and I participated in a lot of those endless round and round discussions on every topic under the sun,
Well, and you layer on top of that all the sexual excitement. It's a really special time in life, isn't it?
Yeah, and also there's one character named Charlotte amongst the women in the book who makes the case that you can't separate out the sexual excitement from the intellectual excitement, and that in fact feminist theory is hot, and all this discourse about misogyny and gender hatred is so hot, and the others are saying, it undermines it to say that it's hot. Stop saying that. And she's like, come on. Stop trying to pretend that we're not turned on by these ideas at the same time as we're intellectually excited by them.
Yeah, well, there's a power struggle, and that's very can be very erotic.
Well, it's a huge part of eroticism, right? Is the struggle for power and the tension there. Yeah, for sure.
So Karen hulls, and I thought of the hulls of the Greek ships. I don't know if you tried to put that in there intentionally.
No, see, these are fabulous things that happen. But yeah, it's sort of just a empty shell or ready to be filled.
She's a Canadian sophomore at a Ivy League college in the 1990s. Why did you choose the 90s instead of a present day?
I'm on a campus every day. I teach at Ryerson University, so I interact with undergraduates. My characters are undergraduate students, right, in their second year and third year and upward. And I just felt because I'm narrating insider cultures amongst students, these sort of subcultures of the skater boys and the frat boys and the journalist students, I felt like I really needed to get the exact details right as much as possible. And it was much, honestly, easier for me with my own research and my access to go back in my own memory and then corroborate little cultural details from that time period than it would be for me to try to, insinuate myself with groups of my students and try to get their language and their exact music they're listening to. It just would be fraudulent in a way. I could do it, but it would be a lot more work. So in some ways it is a historical novel, essentially it's that old and it really it's really saturated with the music and the cultural, like the brands and the food items one would bring to a potluck. It's in the end it has a feel that's different from today. I mean, there's no social media in the novel, for one thing, right? And that makes it a fundamentally different public situation.
And you flip back and forth between the past and the present, which is a kind of a Greek epic technique, isn't it?
Yeah, I was interested in portraying the fallout, the impact of the events that happened in the past on the characters in the present. And actually the present is a very thin in the novel compared to the past. It's intentionally so. The main character, Karen, is experiencing a thinned out experience of adult life, and that feels, it's meant to feel thin in the novel and sort of insubstantial because she's essentially still dwelling in the past. And part of why she's compelled to revisit in memory and in conversation the events of the past is because she's stuck. She's unable to move forward in her life in the present. Essentially, she needs to go back emotionally and psychologically and work through the catastrophic events of the mid-90s that happened to her and that she participated in when she was a student, in order to try to achieve some sense of closure or resolution to move forward with her present life, which takes place in 2010. So even that is a while ago now, but there's not a lot of substance in Karen's life, or she's not deeply connected to her life in the present, and that's intentional in the book.
It's been accused of being melodramatic.
Yeah, so is Greek mythology. It's really melodramatic.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that drew me to the Greek intertext is how high the stakes feel when you're in an undergrad program, and when you're that age, you're post-adolescent. If you get broken up with, it's the end of your world.
First love is huge, isn't it?
Yeah, and so the melodrama is it's a reflection of the experience of the characters, absolutely, that things do not feel lukewarm when you're that age. Things in the present feel lukewarm for Karen, for the narrator, by contrast.
Yeah.
But things in the past, that's, life and death, literally. Stakes.
Life
and death stakes.
Suicide it's a topic, isn't it?
Yeah, it comes up in the novel for sure, and just the emotional, I guess in some cases pre-existing conditions in the characters. That's something that I have been experiencing as a professor. I've been encountering it. How and this is in the news too. It's statistically true that more and more students are confronted with pre-existing mental health issues when they come to university, because in their parents' houses it's been managed with their parents' help, and so they've had a very often a very stable or more stable support structure through high school. So even if they had underlying depression or other mental health issues, they're sort of ferried through with the help of their parents. They're ferried through the end of high school and off to university. But then they're away from that support network. They're in a dorm, they're staying up late, often they're drinking and experimenting with, various crazy schedules, and then they have this pressure at school, and mental health issues that they may already have been struggling or were latent come out and cause real problems for them. I see that a lot amongst my students, and so that's in this novel too, that students are sort of thrown onto their own resources, and those resources are not always rock solid, right?
Karen is invited to live in this sort of feminist household, but she starts going out with one of the frat brothers, the Gangbang Central, it's nicknamed GBC. And so she gets a first-hand look at how toxic and sexist the flip side is.
What I was interested when I approached the writing of this novel was that experience of in-groups and how different one can be from another. And they're all part of the same campus with the same official sort of way of looking at life, which is, liberal humanities programs, but within that there are these radically different cultures, these microcultures, and the main character Karen, she knows all these people from her first year, but not very well. So she's friends with Mike, the fraternity brother that she hooks up with at the first party of the year. She's like, hey, they hang out, and they end up having sex at this party. She knew him already from her first year, just from classes. And likewise, she answers a housing ad. She wants to live off campus, and she answers an ad in the housing office because she recognizes the woman's name, the contact name, from someone who was in some of her classes that she never spoke to, but admired her outspokenness and the way she seemed to know all this vocabulary that Karen herself doesn't know. So she's attracted to this group of feminists. She wants to know what they know. She feels like they're worldly and intellectual in a way that she yearns to be herself. And also at the fraternity house, she wants to be part of that revelry. She wants to be part of that, what she sees as
Bacchanalia.
Yeah, she wants to be in the swim of that, and she enjoys the fact that dating Mike, one of the frat brothers, gives her a kind of a status, like an insider status there. So she spends a lot of time at the fraternity house, and essentially she ends up moving back and forth throughout a good chunk of the novel as a kind of a spy almost between these two enemy camps, which become increasingly hostile to one another as the feminist students develop this campaign to expose the mistreatment of women in the fraternity.
And she makes excuses for the boys' behavior.
She does, because she's friends with them. The other women just find them deplorable and dismiss them as these immoral assholes, essentially. But Karen has empathy for them. She's seen them in their sleepy, hungover moments, and she sees their stupid jokes and, how cute they can be with each other. And so she, in the same way that she has a deep affinity with with her roommates, and is fond of them and has had great chats with them, she's also fond of the frat boys, and she sees that most of them are well-meaning and just want to party, and they don't take school very seriously. But they're not openly depraved people, the vast majority of them.
And what you do is capture the feverish binarism of this debate. Yeah.
Well, it's Karen, the protagonist, who experiences the biggest sort of cognitive dissonance and the split in her own mind between these two ways of looking at the world, essentially,
Yeah.
What is school for? What is sex for? What is class for? They have wildly different views on all those things, the group of feminists and the group of frat boys.
That brought up, this binarism sort of brought up the idea that, at least men see it this way anyway, there's rape, there's violence, and then there's being a bit of a jerk. So there's a sliding scale, and yet men seem to be tarred with one brush.
Well, I think that's not, I think in the book, it's not only the men that are tarred with one brush, it's the women too. And there's that hinge word in the book, right, which is rape, which is that as soon as that word is employed by a woman or a man in a context, it throws the whole discussion onto another, sort of over the fence into a different field, where one group becomes the accused and very defensive, and they all kind of band together to change the facts and hide the facts, and so she wasn't even at the frat house, that sort of thing, defensive. And the accusing woman and the people supporting her or whatever, they are suddenly cast into a camp where they have to be absolutely impeccable in their behavior and attitudes, and otherwise their own sexual history is trotted out and used against them in all the public settings, right? So they have to become these completely sort of chaste, virginal, also defensively so, in order for that accusation to operate in the way it's meant to in the campus inquiries or the courtroom or the media or anywhere. And so it puts everyone into this position where there cannot be any dialogue between the two groups.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying that rape accusations are something that shouldn't exist and that we don't need the legal system and we don't need the justice and the legal recourse when these very clear lines get crossed. It's just that in a lot of circumstances, it's a kind of like a guillotine comes down, and there can be no further discussion, and that's part of the idea of calling rape a red word, right? There's an image
just
where,
like racist.
It's
a showstopper.
Yeah, and it's not that we can ban the word. It's not that we can't have those discussions. We need them. That's absolutely crucial to call it what it is, right? But the effort to call it what it is, it really troubles the characters throughout this novel. They keep saying it's not really rape, is it? Or you can call it that, but it's actually this. Like the fight over what to call it is integral in the book.
Well, that's the thing. It's not just rape. Rape is rape, and then there's a whole range of other things.
There's a whole range of behaviors. That's right, and it's all those shades of gray that are really difficult to continue to navigate. And also, this novel is set before the era of the language around consent, which is really the prevailing agreed upon language now in university. And that's a huge part of what makes this a historical novel, is that there's a bit of discussion about consent in this novel. Mostly it has to do with if a woman is incapacitated with alcohol, she can't give consent. That's something that's talked about in this novel. But the idea of consent and what it can actually mean in the way of a positive discussion or just a positive set of agreed upon terms, in sexual encounters isn't really there. It's not available to the characters in this novel. And I think that's one way forward from a lot of these sort of vocabulary quandaries, that are troubling the characters in this novel.
Yeah, I think you mentioned somewhere that we have the vocabulary now, whereas we didn't before.
Yeah, I don't think we've mastered the vocabulary. I
No.
think there's still a long way to go, but I think it's better than it was. I mean, there was, in the 90s, the big discussion was we shouldn't call it date rape, we should call it acquaintance rape, because it's not just when you're out on a date with a stranger. Really what we're talking about are, sexual assaults that happen because the person knows you and you know them, and they cross these lines and they assume that you're okay with, having sex. And that was, that was a vocabulary move back in the 90s, but I think we're quite some distance ahead of that now.
Speaking of the environment at the university, I don't know if this is you or someone else, but it's a super oxygenated atmosphere of attention and information and privilege and power. That's you, right?
That's in the novel. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good way of describing it.
Yeah, it's a kind of a late in the novel. That's a passage that Karen is sort of reflecting back on that heady mix of intellectual stimulation and also sort of self-importance that a lot of students at that age believe they're going to change the world, and they believe that they're in the moment that matters most in all of history right now because of all these topics they're talking about. And then it could be a slow process of disappointment, an anticlimax later on as you become an adult and realize that those moments felt like that, but they weren't actually changing the world. They were in this little bubble of privilege, actually, on a university campus.
I'm not going to get into the definitions of strope, antistrophe, and epode, unless you want to.
Those are devices that are used in Greek epic, Greek plays on stage that are just a kind of a circling. The first act is a circling forward, a moving toward a certain set of conclusions, and then antistrophe is when that circle reverses and you get all the counter impulses and counter arguments come into the drama, and then the epode is like the after song. It's this sort of conclusion that the chorus comes in and tries to make it seem universal and applicable. Yeah, so it has to do with the pulses of ancient Greek drama, essentially.
And you wanted to put that in the novel so people knew about that.
Well, the novel's written roughly in three acts, book one, book two, book three, and I'm just having so much fun with all that Greek stuff that I called it that. And whether someone were, some student someday writing an essay on the red word, are they going to be able to find evidence that we've got a circling and then a counter circling in terms of the book's rhetorical position? I don't know. Good luck to them. That's not my job.
We did touch on this, but the fact that there's really no side of the debate that goes unchallenged. You sort of highlight the fact that not all boys are alike and not all feminists are alike. There's a wide range of beliefs within each.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm interested in is in the novel is the difference between the way that people behave as individuals when confronted with a set of choices or difficult circumstances, or the way that they behave when they're in a group. And so group psychology is something that really interests me, and the sort of mob mentality that can take over and amplify certain types of behavior. In the novel, there is a kind of mob mentality that takes over, not just for the fraternity boys when they're at a party, and all hell breaks loose, but amongst the feminist students too, when they're in an activist setting or they're having their own type of celebration. There's a kind of a chaos sets in that sets good sense to one side and sets ethical behavior to one side, and that happens on both sides of the debate.
The novel has been accused of trivializing an important topic, rape. The fact that Karen is dumb and stays dumb throughout. How do you respond to that?
Well, I'm not sure how that would trivialize the topic, because I think what we have in Karen is a narrator who's immobilized by the inability to act in the face of violence, but also in the face of people she cares about behaving in ways that are deeply shocking to her. And she doesn't know how to doesn't know how to blast through all of that with her own action and decisiveness and decision, and instead she becomes a very passive and receptive type of character, where she's essentially playing the classic role that a narrator in a novel of high drama plays, where she's recording the action and she's trying to sift through its repercussions for herself, but she can't in the space of the action itself. So if you think about The Great Gatsby and Nick Carraway recording these big personalities around him, he's not a hugely decisive or active character himself, right?
He's just got this little cottage,
right?
And you can see thanks to him, you know what's going on in the mansion. Yeah, and
possibly if you're deeply in love with Gatsby and you see the tragedy coming upon him, you want to shake Nick by the shoulders and say, "Step up!" And in the same way, there's frustration about Karen, who is kind of crippled by her own role as witness, and or at least doesn't know how to move from being a witness to being an actor. And I think the frame narrative in this novel, where Karen is revisiting these events and sifting through them for herself as an adult, that's her finally trying to process some of this stuff and take some ownership of what happened and move on. But that doesn't happen for her until 10, 15 years after the big dramatic events in the novel that take place. And there's only the smallest suggestion that she's going to be able to move forward from all of this at the end of the book. But I think the suggestion is there. And I think that rather than trivializing the issue of rape or the problem of rape, the novel is circling constantly and obsessively around that problem, and
that's what's happening right now in society.
And it's not solving that problem. No. So in that sense, it's showing the problem as an intractable problem, and one that we need to be working on, but not one that I know how to solve,
Well, Aristophanes knows how to solve it. In Lysistrata, his play, there's a woman whose mission it is to end the Peloponnesian War between Greek city-states. And her solution is to deny sex to all the men. So maybe that's the course that should be taken. Yeah,
the problem is then the women don't get to have sex either.
And back then that didn't matter. It sure does now.
Well, that is a kind of a dilemma that the female students talk about amongst themselves and grapple with, is that how do you, as a woman, in a culture, where there's this disparity between the genders and what access they have to power and freedom and agency, right? The frat boys can do whatever they want, still get great jobs after university. The female medical students are sitting there talking about which professor they have to wear low-cut shirts near in order to get better grades. They're just in two completely different positions of power there in terms of how to get ahead in society. Yeah. And when you're in that situation, what kinds of actual free choices can you make around your own sexual desires, right, as a woman? And the students are trying to figure that out, and some of them are very consciously trying to pursue sexual freedom for themselves, and that in some ways is the most radical set of acts and conversations in the novel, because in a context where the genders are cast into such different roles, what does it look like for a woman to sort of self-determine in terms of her sexual behavior, right? And these women in Lysistrata, they're not sexually self-determining. All they're doing is reacting to the men. They're trying to manipulate the men, using their own sexuality as some kind of currency or bartering material. Yeah. That's not sexual freedom. That's a very constrained set of possibilities for female sexuality, to say yes or to say no. That's the only power they have, is to grant or withhold their own access to their own bodies, right? And the women in the Redword find themselves kind of in similar situations, and they don't want to be there. Mm-hmm. They want to find a different way, but it's difficult, proves difficult. It's really easy to be outrageous or slutty, or to go too far, or be cast beyond public approval when you do that, as the female students in the novel are discovering.
Well, I'm very glad that you don't like the idea of withholding sex. That's great.
Hey, this isn't personal. This is fictional.
Well, congratulations on writing a provocative, thought-provoking novel.
Thank you very much.
You were working on, I should let you sort of dwell with the fact that you've won big award.
Yes,
but you're working on another novel as we speak.
It's true. It's interesting that those two things are sort of in my mind at the same time. I'm having such a good time with this award, and I'm here in Ottawa to, be feted. And yesterday, all of us 14 winners of the Governor General's Award stood up in the gallery in the House of Commons, and all the MPs stood up and turned and looked us in the face and gave us a standing ovation. And we just sat through question period before that. And it was hot in there, and it's a bit dispiriting listening to the level of it. But then there was this moment where we were called to stand up, and the speaker said all our names, and it was such a visceral thrill having all those eyes on us, and some of them were mouthing "well done" and thumbs up, and it felt like exactly the acknowledgement it was meant to be, where the people making decisions in our country were acknowledging the writers, the cultural workers, and that felt fantastic. It was a real moment that obviously they'd planned to be like that, and it felt great. Worth every second of question period. But at the same time, I'm deep in the murky territory of finishing the first draft of my next novel. And I don't have a clue where it's heading or how I'm going to find my way out of the swamp.
What's it about?
It's about not the invention, but the creation of an important deck of tarot cards in the early 20th century. And so the novel, in the same way that I sort of am playing with Greek mythology with the red word, this novel plays with the structure or the sequence of the tarot cards, and I'm doing some formal experimentation along that and along those lines. And as I said, I have no idea how to resolve a lot of the problems I've created for myself in the novel, but it's part of the process, I guess. But one of the things the award has changed about my writing practice is that I feel I sat down, in the last couple of weeks to work on it, as I usually do, and I felt this strange kind of expanding of the frontiers of possibility in the work itself. So instead of trying to stitch things up and make them tidy for readers to have access to, instead I find myself feeling a deep sense of permission to go deeper and go wilder and pursue the outreaches of my own, or the outer reaches of my own talent, I guess, or my own knowledge as a writer. And it's
to trust it.
To trust it because it's been recognized in some way, and I hate to think that I'm writing for public recognition. Well, I'm not, because you can't possibly write a 300-page novel over 5 years if you're just waiting for the public recognition. It has to be much more internally motivated by that. Mm-hmm. But it is true that the recognition is changing things and expanding them for me a little bit, artistically speaking and creatively speaking, and that's kind of a fantastic effect that, of course, I'm only just starting to realize because it just happened. It's exciting.
Feels pretty good.
I feel very lucky, yes.
The Red Word is published by ECW in Canada. They came out with a hardback and a paperback at the same time?
No, it's been published in paperback, and in the States it's published by Grove Atlantic, which is a large independent press. Yeah.
Great press.
And it's actually coming out in March in the UK from another small press, a literary press called Tramp. And they're putting together a beautiful package for the novel. The cover is fantastic, and I'm just seeing that now. It's just coming out now. I
love what ECW has done with your cover. They've got this kind of gloss on it. There's also kind of it looks like a smashed window pane that if you have to turn the cover to the light to see it.
Yeah, you can't really see it online, when you're buying the book. You have to have it in your hands. And
it's beautiful.
There's a key moment of smashed glass that has really, really catastrophic results in the book. So that's a real.
They're picking up on that.
That's once you've read it and you pick it up again, you're like, oh, that's what that is.
No, thank you, Sarah. It's been great to talk to you.
It's been really nice to chat with you, Nigel. Thank you.
Sarah Henstra is a professor of English at Ryerson University and author of the young adult novel Mad Miss Mimic, and most recently the adult fiction novel The Red Word. Thanks again.
Thanks.